Hello to any of you who have joined us early. We will be starting shortly. I'm Cheryl, and along with me is Brad. And just hang tight. We'll be starting in a few seconds.
Hi, everyone.
And I see we have people joining, so welcome. I'm Cheryl. This is Brad. We are really pleased to be joining you here, and we will be going live and starting officially in about 30 seconds. So just hang tight. And welcome. And we are here live. Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Cheryl Cran, and I'm the co-founder of Super Crucial Leader Retreats. I'm also the founder of Next Mapping, and with me is my co-founder, Brad Brenninger. Brad, say
Hi,
hi.
everyone. Hello, everybody.
And we are really excited to have you join us here today for our webinar on Elevate Your Hybrid Team Performance, Increase Your Productivity Results. If you would like to interact with us, there is a chat, there's a comment section. You can enter comments, but I would also like to suggest that you could also text message me, and I will look at those texts throughout the webinar. My mobile number for text messaging is 604-340-4700. And again, to text me questions is 604-340-4700, or you can enter your questions in the comment box and we'll take a look at that as we continue. So we're here today to share with you elevating your hybrid team performance, increasing productivity and results. And this topic is really relevant right now with many, many leaders. I understand. I know that you're all from the mutual insurance industry. I have clients in the mutual insurance industry working with their leaders and teams on helping them to elevate performance, helping leaders to be more productive and effective than they already are, and helping the organization to be both progressive and moving towards more success. So let's keep going here. And what I'd like to do is just give a really brief intro of myself and Brad so that you can all know who your facilitators are and the expertise that each of us brings to this webinar. So again, I'm Cheryl Cran. I'm the co-founder of Super Crucial Leader, also the CEO of Next Mapping, a future of work consultancy. And I've written a number of books. My most recent book is Super Crucial Human, all about the need for leaders to elevate their human skills, their people skills, in addition to their technological skills for greater effectiveness. Brad, I'll hand it over to you to self-introduce yourself.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Brad Brenninger, co-founder with Cheryl of Super Crucial Leader. And I am also the EVP of Strategy at Believe Co., and I lead our AI Innovation Lab there as well. It is a brand marketing, PR, and communication agency, and we operate in all over North America. Some of my insurance clients include Secure in Canada, Sun Life Financial, Manulife. I've done work with Desjardins, so I do understand the industry quite deeply. My specialty is in brand marketing and communication. Most recently was on the board of the AMA in Canada, and also co-authored a book called Building Your Organization's Brand.
Wonderful. So you're in good hands here on this webinar. A lot of expertise and excellence in working with clients and in the insurance industry. I have a number of clients in the mutual insurance industry, which I will not name due to privacy, but you are a small group, so you probably may have heard or know who those companies are. Let's look at the agenda for today. We are going to look at some hybrid workplace research. We're going to look at some examples of companies and leaders that are leveraging hybrid dynamics. We're going to really talk about what are the future ready skills that we need in order to be successful, and then some strategies to elevate team performance. And, you know, really where we're at with hybrid is that it is here to stay. I actually just had a conversation with a client in the US today around how they are finding that companies that are insisting on in office are struggling with attracting new talent, and their talent pool is shrunken as a result of that. So we do know that hybrid is here to stay. We know that it's different for every company. So hybrid, even if you are in office 4 days a week, remote 1 day a week, that's still hybrid. So making sure that and for each of you that are listening, each leader that's on this webinar, you're going to have your own unique hybrid structure that is working for you and your culture. You can see from this research, 58% of companies have embraced hybrid with average in-office days 2 to 3 per week. 67% of leaders are challenged with leading hybrid dynamics, and 73% of employees have increased stress due to hybrid dynamics. So I know when people see these numbers, they go, well, there's your case for why hybrid doesn't work. They they try to use it to validate their position on how they view hybrid. But the reality is, if you look beneath the data, you'll see that and we've at NextMap, and we've done numerous surveys of employees and leaders on multiple issues, including hybrid. And the research we consistently get from the employee side is, why would we go back to full-time in office when we know that part-time remote works? It is effective. And a leader would argue and say, well, we want to increase accountability, and there's increased accountability if you're in office. So that's one argument. And then another argument is, how do we measure performance if we don't have people in the office more regularly? So those questions really come back to, the answers come back to leadership. So if leaders are challenged with leading hybrid dynamics, it really comes down to skill. Do they have the flexibility, the adaptability, and the willingness to adapt their leadership approach to the in-office dynamics as well as to the remote dynamics, and be able to lead both those dynamics in a highly effective way? And then the statistic around increased stress, the reason there's increased stress, and again, we've got a lot of data to support this, is because of the lack of alignment, the lack of clarity around expectations, and the lack of coaching and one-on-one support from leader to employee to ensure alignment with culture and with hybrid policies. So there's a lot here around what we have control over as leaders in making sure we're effective at this. So if we have a mindset that says, I don't like it, or I prefer people in office, that mindset alone is going to prohibit us being our best selves as leaders. So just pointing out that data, and we've got a whole bunch more research that we share in that regard. I just think this quote is really relevant. Remote and hybrid work didn't create the need for more effective work practices. It revealed them. So I've been a consultant for over 20 plus years, and I have been speaking about leadership development, flexible leadership, adapting to the generations, adapting to different personalities, leading change with positivity and inspiration. And really what's happened now with remote and hybrid is all of that needs to be amplified and practiced. That's really where we are now today and moving forward. So that's the opportunity. Rather than feel frustrated by the dynamics of hybrid, really looking at what are the opportunities that we have in front of us. Some of the companies that are succeeding at hybrid include Slalom, who has been on the Great Place to Work winner list 8 times. And their hybrid, and this is Canadian, by the way, this is in Canada, and their hybrid policy is employee choice. Now, if you go and research Slalom, you'll see that they are a big consulting firm. They do multiple things, but the employee choice, they talk about this, that they give the employee choice not as a free-for-all and not as a everybody can do what they want, but they link it to performance. So for example, if the employee chooses to work primarily remote, then the remote metrics are very clearly outlined. They do assessments for autonomy. In other words, how autonomous is someone so that they can be highly effective at remote work. And they constantly monitor their performance in relation to the employee's choice of work. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't hold them accountable to their performance, whether they're in office or remote. It means that your strategies for accountability are really clear, they're understood, and they're practiced. So for example, if I'm a leader and I have a remote worker and they're slipping in their metrics, they're not matching what we've just dialogued around performance, then that's my opportunity in my consistent one-on-one conversations that I'm having to ask questions around, is everything okay? What's going on? I noticed that your customer service numbers have shifted. Is there something impacting that? So really the accountability is about a people first human touch, that it's not about where they're working that determines effectiveness. It's how we're supporting them to work that determines their effectiveness. And then SGGG, also a great place to work. It's financial services industry. Their hybrid policy is also employee choice. Now, I do know in the mutual industry, because as I mentioned, I have clients in the mutual industry, that mutual insurance industry, that the employee choice is probably not necessarily where many of you are at this stage. Likely most of you have a hybrid policy where you've got 2 to 3 weeks in office, maybe more, maybe it's 4 days a week. And generally that is what most mutual insurance companies are doing. However, I am seeing as technology adaptation continues to take over some of the repetitive tasks, that this movement towards more frequent employee remote work is going to take place. And that's as technology and AI starts to be able to handle the administrative tasks that many employees are doing. And when you think about it, if you say to employees now, okay, well, the pandemic's over, everybody has to come back in office full time. That is a choice, and some companies are doing that. But what we're seeing in our research is that the ramifications of that are lower employee morale and more difficulty in attracting progressive talent. So I'm not sure if
Yeah,
you're seeing that in your organization. Go ahead, Brad. Yes.
yeah, to build on what you're saying, Cheryl, I'm looking at this from two different perspectives. I lead a hybrid team, so that's that perspective. But then I also work with a range of clients that are at different levels of hybrid teams. And one of the things that's really important when I look at brand and communication, one of the biggest elements to brand is employer brand and recruitment brand. And I think that one of the key issues that you've raised that is crucial to this discussion is how is your organization presenting externally, and what's happening then when people come internal and they're being led by you or anyone else in the firm. And the truth is that the come back to the office 4 days a week does not play well from a brand perspective right now. So I do think there are so many different applications to how this can work that we really need to be aware. Our company policy is we're at 2 to 3 days in the office.
Uh-huh.
For some of our teams, they're moving to 4 days, and those are really the teams that are more focused on collaboration, or where the in-person
Yes.
collaboration is more effective. But for the organizational folks who can do their jobs and they're much more independent, the 2 to 3 days is working fine. I
Mhm.
think if we said, look, you have to come back into the office 5 days a week, again, like you said, Char, it would be difficult to attract anyone, and it would also create a little bit of a brand concern internally as well, where people would say, look, the cat's out of the bag. Everyone has kind of joined in on this hybrid approach, and I'm not sure that we're willing to go back to the way things
Exactly
were.
right.
So from
Exactly.
a brand perspective, you really have to ask yourself three questions. The first one is, how do we want to be seen in the marketplace from a employer perspective? Employer of choice does not mean 5 days in the office anymore. At least not now. And you're able to look more detailed in the future, Cheryl. But I don't think that it's coming anytime soon. So that's the first question. The second one is, what are the processes and evaluations that you're using to determine the success of your hybrid policy? So if you're using old performance evaluation tools, if you're using old in-office leadership approaches, then you're going to run into a problem. and
Mhm.
and again, we'll talk about more of that as we go. And then the third one is, what can you do to support the hybrid environment? What are you doing to support that? What are you doing to grow that? What are you doing to really lean into how your hybrid teams are working?
Yeah, excellent. And I put a question in the comments, what is your company hybrid policy? And Tim Schaff answered saying remote first, or as we said, employee choice, which is great. That's
Right.
awesome. Thank you,
Yeah,
Tim, for
that's great.
your
Thanks, Tim.
comment. Yeah. So, let's look at what are the, Brad, nice segue as to your three things. What are the hybrid success factors? And it's exactly what you said. Company is a people first, performance based culture. What we have found is if your organization is focused on your people's progress, your people's success, your people feeling engaged, and of course, in the mutual insurance company, that is part of the culture of mutual insurance, is that it's all about mutuality. It's all about everyone collaborating and working together, which is wonderful. And at the same time, as I said earlier, I have a number of clients in the mutual insurance industry, and sometimes it can be the conflict between like a family feel of a company versus a performance based culture. And I've seen that firsthand in the work. And so performance based doesn't mean that we're actually not family focused. It actually means we care about each other, but we're holding each other accountable to performance. That's what it really means. The other success factor is leaders are flexible, able to inspire and lead in complex dynamics. So, I wrote a book in 2015 called The Art of Change Leadership. And in that book, I predicted actually hybrid workplace and remote in 2015. I didn't predict a pandemic. So didn't have that crystal ball, but all the research on the generational work attitudes and all of the research on technology innovation was pointing to a future where flexibility was the future of work. And so leaders who are able to pivot with that flexibility, the leaders who are able to accept that in today's workforce, the workers are not work first, life second. The whole attitude around work has changed to, I want to have a life first, work augments or supports my life. So if you as a leader are, for example, somebody who's just like you, your work is your primary identity, you will struggle with a worker who says, hey, I'm having childcare issues right now. And you might go, well, you've got a job to do. And that might be your response, right? Versus that empathetic, compassionate, holistic view of people and their lives versus just being the person they are in the workplace. And then the other
Yeah,
success factor,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead, Brad, please. Yep.
I was just going to say on that point, Cheryl, one of the best things I heard someone said to me on my team, it's no longer about work-life balance, it's about work-life integration. And it's really understanding, the fact that people need to perform, but they also need to be recognized when they are performing. And when
Yeah.
you're in office or when you're in front of someone's face, it's much easier to evaluate that. So as a leader, I think one of the things we all have to be focused on is, what are our evaluation techniques now? How are we actually going to our teams and saying, okay, we understand that you still need to collaborate, you still need to be productive, you still need to perform, but we're not necessarily evaluating the way we did when you were in office, because we
Right.
could walk by your desk and say, good job, or we could, sit down and deal with a problem immediately. The remote hybrid environment changes that a little bit, but
Yes.
there are still, what we need to focus on, and you talk about this in your last point, Cheryl, training, coaching, and development being the priority. But what does that training, coaching, and development look like? It has
Mhm.
to be hybrid and remote forward. It can't be, let's take the way we used to do things and just,
Right.
do them remotely.
Right. No, and to that point about training, coaching, and development, again, speaking of a specific client I'm working with right now, a lot of times we'll go to the employee and say in our performance discussions or in our one-on-ones, what training or development would you like? Versus
Yeah.
as your manager, here's what I'm observing are your strengths and your opportunities, and it would be helpful. So let's use the example of someone who's working in IT. And I don't mean to stereotype here or generalize, but I'll use it as an example that in my experience, a lot of workers in IT are very technically focused and not necessarily have focused on the people skills, the emotional intelligence. And so let's say I have somebody in my IT department where technically they're really sound, but their ability to communicate the technology on to the user, their ability to build bridges of technology throughout the organization might not be there. So maybe their training opportunities are emotional intelligence, collaboration skills. So really training, coaching, and development is it relevant to the work that we're asking them to do, but also to their own development. And I think, Brad, that's a pivot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as leaders, I mean, it falls on us as well to understand the different requirements that people might have. Sometimes it's difficult for people to articulate what they might need.
That's right.
And although for some people they can do that very well, there are others on our teams that we have to kind of go, okay, here's where I think, you could use the extra. So I want to look at what your plan is, but then here's my plan for you. Let's discuss both of these
Exactly.
and arrive on a mutual strategy that is going to help them succeed in the environment that they're currently in, not in a previous way of doing things where we, evaluate in a very particular kind of way.
Exactly right. And then that's where with the coaching, it's really about the consistent one-on-one. And this is something that I emphasize with all my clients is you can't, and it's because at first with people's one-on-ones, I've had leaders say to me, oh, well, we know each other. I talk to them almost every day. It's like, no, that's not what we're talking about. Is a one-on-one that's focused on how are you doing as a person? What's going on in
Yeah.
your life that's helping you succeed or not succeed? How can I support you as a leader to be more effective? That's what one-on-ones are. And depending on the size of your team, for those of you watching, if you have a team of like 10 or less, it would be optimal to have those one-on-ones on an every 2-week basis. If your team's larger than that, at minimum once a month. And I know a lot of leaders go, oh, that's so much work. But the investment in that elevates productivity. It elevates engagement. It elevates collaboration. It just pays off in so many different ways. And Brad, I'm sure you've seen that in your organization.
Well, even more than seen it, I took your advice, Cheryl, because I've tried to create, one-on-ones with my team. And here's the thing about that. Having a scheduled time where people know that they're going to have your ear and have your
Yes.
attention in a hybrid and remote environment, it becomes even more crucial because you can't just do the office drop by. You can't walk up to the water cooler as often and say, how are things going? So when people have that scheduled time and they know, it alleviates their stress, it alleviates their wondering or their, there's that phrase, out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly.
As advantageous as remote and hybrid work is in so many aspects of our life, one of the things that it challenges is our ability to connect. And so having those scheduled times to connect where you can be open and you can be forward and you can talk about work, but also about how they're doing. And it just alleviates some of the stress of remote and hybrid work that some people do feel.
Yeah, it also actually prevents surprises. So, I've
Mm,
had leaders say to me, well, this person quit and I had no idea. Like, I don't
right.
know why. And it's like, well, if you were having regular one-on-ones, you would have sensed, a disconnect or something wasn't right or that they might be looking for something else. So the one-on-ones are also like keeping in tune with what that employee is thinking about and their satisfaction levels. So let's keep going here. That kind of ties into the future ready skills here. And Brad, I know you have a lot to add here. I'll just go first and then I'll let you add from your
Hmm.
perspective. But you know,
Yeah.
again, from my perspective and from the consulting that I do, the leaders who have a people first focus, that desire, that the focus of a leader on others, the focus on their success, on their happiness, on their progress, those leaders tend to be the least stressed, but they also have the highest level of employee loyalty. Along with that, adaptable mindset, the leaders who can catch themselves when they're, pushing back mentally against an idea or against somebody's style of their personality. So that ability to adapt to, oh, okay, now I'm dealing with somebody who is a Gen Z, for example, and they really value flexibility. Or now I'm dealing with a Zoomer, which is a baby boomer who refuses to age. So now I'm dealing with a Zoomer, and the Zoomer is really more about wanting more traditional structure in this particular example. So that adaptability is such a huge, and it's of such wide scope. We do talk about this in our leadership retreats. I'll talk more at the end, but we do have an upcoming leadership retreat, November 5th to 7th in Vancouver. And we use the word retreat, but it's not spa. Retreat means
Mm.
leaders come together to strategize, to connect, collaborate, and to learn future-ready strategies to be more successful. But also the ability to flex with hybrid dynamics, the ability to strategically plan. And there's a difference between strategy and operations. And I see this often in the organizations I work with where people are operationally minded. Well, we got to do this, which is task, versus what's the overall strategy? And then what are the operational pieces that fall under that strategy? And as leaders, we can get trapped in task and operation, and it prohibits us from being even more impactful because we're lacking that, or we could really be developing that strategic mindset. Collaboration across the company. I still see this today. Siloing is still alive and well. And siloing is where the departments are autonomous. They're doing their thing, but they're not necessarily interconnected across the system. And so, for example, using IT, you could have IT doing all sorts of initiatives, but they haven't necessarily interfaced with the users or with the other departments. And so therefore you're creating products and services in a vacuum. And it's not until those services and products are delivered to the user that all of a sudden you go, oh, wait a second, this is wrong and this is happening and this is a challenge. It's because of that interdepartmental collaboration needs to be elevated. And then lastly, leveraging technology. I mean, when we all had to use Zoom in 2020, when the pandemic started, it was like, it's quite humorous, right? People had their cameras off. They had their audio, they had cats in the background. Their kids were crying. Like, it was a free for all of everybody trying to leverage the technology. And now in 2024, it is expected professionally that you know how to operate the technology of what you're doing, but you know how to leverage the technology that your organization has. So in your mutual, if your technology is Guidewire, for example, that the focus is on elevating everyone's skill proficiency in the technology so that becomes seamless. And once the technology integration is all across the board throughout the company, now we can spend more time on people development, coaching one-on-one, because the technology has been equalized. And Brad, I know you have things to add here.
Yeah, a few things, going to the task and operational element that you talked about, Cheryl. One of the things about most of the teams that I've worked with and clients that I've worked with is that people are very task and operationally focused. And where they struggle a little bit is on the strategy side. And so working to define what is our not just our policy around hybrid or remote work environment, but how are we actually going to put it into practice? How are we going to enable it to happen? And you raised some really important points, which is number one, let's get past the technology piece of it. Let's get everybody up to speed as much as possible on the technology so that there's, how often have we been in those Zoom meetings where it's like, I don't know how to share my screen, right? Like, and it becomes this, really difficult way. But if we can kind of get everybody at that equal level, then we bypass some of that distraction and we're able to focus more on the work itself. The next thing is looking for strategic ways to enable that collaboration to happen. One of the things that we've talked a lot about on my teams is, let's do a teams meetup where we bring different people from, the project. We put different people from the organization on a single project. We have a teams meetup where we just brainstorm, where we collaborate, where it's not about let's end up on a solution here. It's just to kind of spend some time doing some of that strategic visioning that perhaps people are missing, right? Because the thing about remote is where it's increased productivity, it's also made us very task and outcome focused, as opposed to, where's the creative thinking? Where is the, and bringing AI back into the conversation, as AI becomes more and more integrated from a task-oriented administrative partner, our creative thinking is going to have to become better. Our problem solving is going to have to become better. And if we lose those capabilities along the way because we're so focused on, let's just get online, be productive, and move on, it's going to eliminate some of the human aspects of what makes us really unique. We'll talk a lot about that in the retreat, because that whole human EQ, empathy, creativity, all of those elements that make us super crucial humans, are part of this conversation. But just from a collaboration perspective, being able to use the technology to continue to share that creativity, to continue to share those discussions, becomes just as important as the task oriented elements of our work as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
you know
And one thing I'd like to add to that is I had a conversation with a client the other day, and we were talking about embedding training, so online training, but embedding it with coaching, so
yeah,
that people are learning, but then they're also getting coached in how to apply it to their particular organization, their job, and their role. And one of the questions that came out of that conversation from someone was, "Well, not everybody has their cameras on." And I said, well, first of all, that is a absolute must in today's environment. When
yeah,
we started back in 2020, cameras off, we're kind of like, we gave people slack for that. No, no,
hmm,
it's 2024. If you are engaged in a virtual communication, your camera's on. If it's
yeah,
off, it implies that you got something to hide, that you're hiding a messy room, or you're hiding that you got something going on in the background, or, so honestly, I get really passionate about this. If we're going to engage with the technology tools, cameras on, making sure we have the bandwidth for our internet so that we're, all of those things are a must have today. They're not just a
yeah,
nice to have, they're a requirement. So I get passionate about that one because it's critical in today's virtual hybrid environment that we are able to see each other, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about strategies to elevate team performance. The number one is leadership skill development. And for those of you, watching and participating, great question to ask. And notice I put a couple questions in the comment section, and these are questions for you to just mull over and say, hang on a second. It's an opportunity to just check in and ask yourself and self-evaluate. But leadership skill development has been proven to be the number one strategy right now for organizations to gain momentum in their success and their progress, because as leaders are more developed, the more they can lead effective teams. It makes perfect sense. And so that investment in leadership skill development is prime as far as being as successful as we can as an organization. The other one is linking the why to performance goals. Gone are the days where we could say to an employee, do this, and expect them to do it. Today, everyone wants to know, how is what I'm doing link into the bigger over strategic plan for the organization? How is it impacting our customers? How is it impacting our policyholders? How is it impacting our brokers? Why, what's in it for me if I do this? And really letting people know clearly why what they're doing is so important. And that comes down to inspirational leadership, right? If I have an employee who, they're lacking in motivation and they're maybe not meeting their performance goals, it's really on me as the leader to reignite that passion and that fire. It's their responsibility to take that and run with it, but it's
yeah.
my
And
responsibility to ignite it. Go ahead, Brad. Yeah.
agreed, Cheryl. And in fact, a great example of that is, as a leader, one of the things that you can watch or look out for is if someone's camera is off, as you mentioned
Yeah,
in the last part of our discussion. If someone's camera is off, if they don't feel connected, if they don't feel, that's almost like a flag
it
to you
is.
as a
Yep.
leader to say, because you know, the one thing that doesn't change, whether you're in office or whether you're online, is engagement. At the end of the day, the employee engagement, the team engagement, the engagement of all of the folks in your organization becomes crucial. And some of those early indicators of low engagement are the kinds of things that show up more easily on hybrid and remote work, where a camera off, or you know someone, even something as simple as what someone is wearing or how their hair looks, or like, if there's not that commitment to
Mhm.
the continued contribution, it will show up much faster often than you can see in office
That
situations.
is true.
So as leaders, I think it's something that we can really look to and work with our teams on those areas to help build that engagement back. So
Mhm.
just a bit of an insight on something that's worked for me there.
And then also, as we said earlier, the defined hybrid expectations, and by what I mean by clearly defined hybrid expectations, it's not a one and done. Often you'll have to repeat the hybrid policy guidelines as a regular communication throughout the organization, just as a reminder. You know, a reminder: these are our hybrid expectations. Come talk to us if you want to. You know, have any questions. That continual open dialogue around the hybrid. And then also, as I said earlier, and I got really passionate about the consistent one-on-ones where we're talking about personal and work. It's not just, oh yeah, I see that person every day, so I know who they are. It's an
Yeah.
intentional one-on-one where we're talking about what they need and how we can support them. So we've covered a lot in this period of time. Some suggested actions from today's webinar: assess your current hybrid success. Are you doing employee surveys? Are you acting on the information in your employee surveys? Are you holding informal surveys where you can do internal polling, where you can do just an internal survey of your teams and your groups? Are you doing leadership surveys to find out where the pain points are for leaders in leading the hybrid dynamics? So it's all about data. The more data that we can access, rather than just sort of assume things, the more we can make strategic decisions based on that information that we're gathering. The second one, identifying opportunities to increase performance with leadership development. For those of you that joined this particular webinar, obviously you're interested in leadership development because you joined us. And so you're eager to continue to learn and grow and expand your expertise, and really focusing on where are that skills gap in our leaders, like your senior leaders, your supervisors. Where are they really strong, and where can we support them to be even better, is a really great opportunity to assess in each of your teams and also throughout the organization. And then leadership development opportunities that include the most up-to-date strategies, including human-centric skills, leveraging technology, and strategic thinking. And that leads me into our offering, as I mentioned at the beginning, is we have specific leadership retreats that Brad and I have developed that are all about the latest skills that leaders need to be successful in today's environment. This next one that we're doing is November 5th to 7th in Vancouver. If you go to the website link, you'll see the pricing options. There's either a pay up all at once, or there's a 3 payment plan. And we're pleased to tell you that the pricing includes hotel, which is very rare for these types of events. So it's a high value, high intense. And like I said, although we call it a retreat, it really is a leadership learning event where you get to spend 3 days of focused time on leadership development and having dialogues around everything we've shared today and much more. And Brad, what would you add to that?
I would just say, like, there's so many aspects to it. There's, your own skills as a leader. There's how you can inspire those skills in your team so that they can become leaders. There's leadership of the team itself, but then there's also a leadership attitude that you can instill on your teams and really push forward. And what we found is that in hybrid and remote work environments, you have to do it a little bit differently than you might have done in office. And all the things that Cheryl and I have gone through today are kind of the initial elements, but we're going to go much deeper in the retreat. And we're also going to talk about, if you do those things, we're in a war for great talent. We're in a situation where we have to stand out among competitors, where we have to find the best and brightest to join our teams. If you can do these things and formalize these things around how you show up from a leadership perspective and how you show up from a remote and hybrid work perspective, it helps drive your brand, your employer brand, your recruitment brand, because it's one thing to say, we are a hybrid friendly employer. It's another thing to say, we are a remote friendly employer who does these 5 things and evaluates you from this perspective and helps you grow in your work life integration by doing these things. And so that expanded view on where we're going and how we're doing is really so important to your own progression as a leader, but also the progression of your teams as leaders as well.
Yeah, and just before we go, I will add that you likely have leaders that you've been thinking about as you've listened to this webinar. And so this event is for leaders at a variety of levels throughout the organization. If you're thinking of specific leaders in your mind who could really use some development opportunity to really accelerate their leadership abilities and impact the organization, then they're welcome as well. So we are up right on time here, 40 minutes. Brad, as always, it's a pleasure to be able to co-facilitate with you. And for everyone watching, thank you so much for your time. We know time is valuable, so we appreciate you spending time with us on this webinar. And if you have any questions for either of us, please email us, Cheryl_Brad@supercrucialleader.com. And you can also go to the website and contact us there. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. All the best.
Thank you, everyone.